На трибунах аллеют знамена, облака в поднебесье плывут. На зеленом ковре стадиона разноцветные майки цветут.
Hello and welcome back to the Russian Football News Podcast. This week, Russia's European campaign ended in what was potentially predictable disappointment, as with a embarrassing but what originally seemed potentially inspiring first half, or first start anyway, which did result in a 4-1 defeat and Russia finishing bottom of Group B. To discuss that, I'm as always joined by David Sanson.
Evening, James.
And of course, as I have spoiled once or twice on the pod, in partly because he's of course Danish, and partly because it was recently the 100th episode of the RFN podcast. To celebrate both of them things, it's the long-awaited return of the Great Dane himself, Mr. Toke Theilade.
Hey James, it's great to be back.
Oh, I've missed those sultry and subtle tones, Toke. Now, what have you been doing since your departure from RFN and you handed it over? Really, have you managed to keep an eye on Russian football too much? Because I'm sure some of the listeners will be eager to hear.
Yes, I'm still following from the outside. I'm still listening to the RFN podcast and following all the great work and all the great content that is coming out of Russian football news. So I'm very, very happy to see that it's still going strong. But I have to admit also that I have started to skip those 9 a.m. games between Ufa and Ural. So a little more casual following now and a little less passionate. And but of course, yeah, I still get all the kicks in the balls and all the disappointments that comes with following Russian football. And of course, as you just said, this tournament was no different. So it's nice to see that some things doesn't change.
Yeah, I think one of the greatest things with Russian football of late is kind of consistency of the disappointments, especially with Spornaya. Now, with yourself on Toke, I did mention it, and as listeners will know, a couple of podcasts ago about, of course, the biggest incident and an event from Group B, which, of course, was the unfortunate cardiac arrest with which Christian Eriksen suffered in Denmark's opening game. Now, as we all know, it's excellent that he has finally recovered. But Toke, more so from an emotional standpoint, what was that like for you? What all of the experience and what's happened since from the Danish perspective? Because for us, it was pretty haunting at the time and relieving, and then actually quite heartwarming to see the response to it and how Denmark themselves are galvanized afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, actually, it was strange because as I was watching it, I was Chromecasting the game, and I was a little bit behind all of my friends, and suddenly all of my group chats exploded at the same time and saying that he had collapsed and stuff, and I had no idea what was going on. I just saw Denmark had a throw, and I thought maybe the goalkeeper had made a howler or something like that. But yeah, then I saw for myself what happened. A few seconds afterwards, and obviously it was shocking, especially as you could see in the replay where he just completely blacked out. But yeah, I mean, I think everybody felt the same, that it was super, super scary, and suddenly football, of course, was not the most important thing anymore. But yeah, I mean, and then it was a complete blackdown. Nobody knew anything. There was no news coming out. Of course, there was a lot of speculation during the game, but nobody knew really what was going on, if he had died or what had happened. I remember I watched the game, the Sevilla game, many, many years ago, where that young defender, what was his name?
Antonio Puerta.
Puerta or something like that. Yeah, exactly. Where he collapsed and died, and of course that was that sort of came to mind, right? But yeah, then we could see that one photo where he was sort of awake when they carried him off, and later came the news that he was awake in the hospital, and of course that was a huge relief. I was disappointed that they started the game on the same day. I feel like somebody in the Danish Authority Football Association should have been the adult there and looked at the players and said, well, clearly we are in no state of playing this game today, so let's play it tomorrow. I mean, I know they all said that they couldn't handle going back to the hotel and postponing the game. But I mean, if they knew that Christian Eriksen was well in the hospital and awake, then surely it would be a much better solution than playing it 2 hours delayed. And yeah, they had to substitute Simon Kjær after a few minutes because he was in no state of playing. And yeah, that was a terrible decision. And luckily for Denmark, it didn't come back to haunt us as they still progressed from the group on that second place. But yeah, I think that was a shame. It has been amazing to see how it has sort of unified everybody, because of course going into the tournament there were decent expectations, like there always is. I mean, people are always imagining best case scenario, right? But then after this happened, it has really unified everybody behind the team, and people have been so supportive in Denmark. I was in Copenhagen, unfortunately not watching the game at the stadium, but I was watching it with my friends for the Russia game, and when I was driving home, I mean, I was seeing red and white shirts everywhere, flags everywhere, and it was nothing like that before the Finland game. Of course, there was hype and people were excited, but this was at a completely different level that I cannot remember having ever seen before in terms of support for the national team. So that was fantastic. And of course, now after this game, after the Belgium game, like the expectations are so high, and the atmosphere is really, really special, and we really have this ecstatic atmosphere going on, and there is Euro fever for sure.
Yeah, certainly. And I think it's fair to say from a non-Danish perspective that Denmark were one of those dark horses in the competition, where obviously winning 92, they have pedigree in this, and Euros in general is far more of a defensive competition than the World Cup is. You don't have those crazy tactics and sort of crazy performances that some of the teams from the other continents across the world bring into it. It is very much more about organisation, and historically, look at Portugal in 2016, Spain in 2008, and then Greece in 2004. More often than not, it is a defensively orientated, solid side who can then build upon that, who does win this competition. And that's really what Denmark, one of the sort of pinnacles of Denmark's game is. And it is that solid defence from both a perspective of them working together as a cohesive unit and the individual talent on show. But before we do get on to Russia, and I'll just quickly ask Toke, what is the sort of what was your thoughts on the Danish squad composition? Are you pleased by it? Because it does really seem that it's quite a talented crop of some younger players who, like, as we'll get into, the goal scorer and the first goal scorer in the game with Russia, and then some real an experienced core that looks quite settled for the longest time I can remember from Denmark team.
I mean, of course, there's too many FC Copenhagen players. That was my first reaction. But on a more serious note, no, I completely agree with you. It is definitely a strong team, and I mean, you saw it at the World Cup as well, that it is a team where the core has been playing together for a very long time. The big issue, of course, is the lack of striking options. I saw some stats before the Russia game where Denmark had the highest expected goals compared to the number of actual scored goals, and there's simply no decent strikers in the squad, which is a little bit strange to say, considering we have a player from Barcelona and one from RB Leipzig, but it's definitely an issue, the offensive options. But for the rest of the team, the midfield is really, really strong. The defense, of course, with I mean that it's amazing how many fantastic central defenders we have, considering the number of players, and there's even been some good players who've been left out on that position. So the depth is really good. But yeah, we could definitely use a strong striker, and I was a little bit jealous of Russia, even though Chuba didn't have his best tournament. I mean, you could still see that. Yeah, he's still a really, really strong guy, and I thought he played, especially in the first half, really well against Denmark. So he would have looked good playing in the Danish jersey for sure.
Yeah, certainly. It is a nice little segue discussing the squad in general, because we've been quite caught up in Russia's squad of late, and I think while the team composition for the win over Finland was pleasantly surprising considering the squad, I think not many people in the Russian side of things has been quite optimistic about Stani's squad in general. But we'll get straight into the game now. And David, you kind of tweeted, I think I was live tweeting from the RFN account, and I was quickly a little scroll through the timeline, and I just seen one from yourself where it was 90 seconds in, 2 minutes in, and you were like, "This is going to be a long night for Russia."
Yeah, I mean I sort of felt proved wrong not too long after that. Obviously, Denmark started very strong again, just like they did against the Belgians. And yeah, those opening sort of 10 minutes, it was looking like Russia was just not even going to get out. There was constantly just 2 banks of 5. But then there's sort of from 15 sort of through to 30, 35 minutes, Russia came out of their shell a little bit. They had some chances, kept Denmark quiet for a bit. Golovin, should have scored probably, or should have done better at the very least. A couple of other decent half chances. And I was like, okay, well, maybe this game isn't going to be so bad. It was looking even at worst. And then Denmark had their sort of first go back on the ball again. They'd had the ball for a couple of minutes, and Damsgaard stuck it in top corner. And that sort of sunk the game, especially for the rest of the first half, from a Russian perspective. And then the rest is sort of history. A bit of self-destruction, glimmer of hope, and then going for glory and completely getting destroyed on counterattacks. So it was classic Russia, no plan B. It just didn't work.
Yeah, I think Russia actually did match up quite effectively defensively in the early stages of the game, before they were stretched and before the game lost all form of semblance of game management. But considering how Denmark performed against Belgium, which that performance has really went under the radar. After the second match, Denmark were pointless, but it's like among the highest XG figures, among the highest shots on target, and allowed among the least shots on target against. So they were really like outperforming in terms of the analytics, but they just couldn't get the result in either game. The first one, I'm not even going to bother analysing because I think it's a total write-off. And out of respect to what happened, I'm not going to bother even analysing the football. But the Belgium match in particular, it was literally the individual brilliance that Belgium have on show through particularly, of course, Kevin De Bruyne. That was the difference between the two sides. So I thought Russia's setup quite early on was effective. It did mean that Dzyuba was far too deep, because I think it's the first time that we've really seen Dzyuba take a part of the defensive actions. He knew that they had to try and he had a cut back to try and stop Højbjerg on the ball, and he was actually closing down probably the most I've seen him for Zenit or Russia at all in about a year or two. He works hard, but he's not a cut passing lanes closing down striker. That's just not Dzyuba's game. He'll chase the ball all day long, but often it's kind of ineffective and not really in an intelligent way. But then that goal really did just change the complexity of it all. I'll have a quick word on Damsgaard first, because I don't want to take away the credit for the strike. I thought it was an excellent strike. And what really impressed me first was his positional awareness. He seems to have a real keen eye for space. And he, a few times, and after that really started doing it more and more, exposed the gap between Russia's two lines, between the two midfielders who were pushing up a little bit and trying to harass the ball carrier, and the back five, particularly down the left of Russia's defence, where there was, every time there was balls coming over, there just wasn't really enough pressure on it. And I think one of the big ones that Kudryashov, I think, to get the yellow card or giving away an early foul, was because he wasn't there early enough and he was kind of too reactive and took out a Danish player. And Damsgaard really exposed that space well, and it's a good finish, but it was his reading of the game to be there already just meant that Russia couldn't get anywhere near him. But I will want to ask now, Toke first, the goal. We discussed it ourselves in a group chat, but do you think that Matvei Safonov maybe has to do better with that in goal, or is it because of the shape, because of the spin on the ball, is it perhaps unfair to expect him to do better?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we talked a little bit about that, and in my opinion, it looked like he is misplaced in goal. It looks like there is a lot of open space to his left side, which is where Damsgaard is kicking the ball. And I mean, I just looked at the XG stats before we went on air here, and it was like 0.04. So obviously, it's not a goal you expect to make. You are expected to make in any way.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, he definitely makes it too easy for Damsgaard to kick that ball in, because if you look at the shot, it's not like it's sitting all the way out at the sidebar at all. I mean, there is definitely some space between the post and the ball. So, but yeah, I mean, he has a lot of open space, and of course he hits the ball amazingly with the curve and everything. So it's a fantastic goal, but yeah, I mean, it is also one of those goals that you cannot really expect to make, and I feel like that's also sort of a missed part of the story of the game, because as you said, I thought Russia looked quite comfortable. I mean, Denmark started really well, but then it became very even until that goal, and Russia looked comfortable. But then Denmark makes, we have these two long shots with an combined expected goals of 0.08, and then Josef Poulsen scores on a complete gift. I think it was Subnin who makes this horrible pass, and at that moment it's over, right? Then there's not much more that Russia can do. So I think, I mean, Denmark played a good game, and especially after the 3-1 goal, of course, there was a lot of pressure, but it's not like that we had a lot of shots against Russia, and I think that, I feel like Cherchesov's plan was maybe not perfect, but at least it was working. But yeah, when you then get those long shots against you, it is definitely a very, very difficult day at the office.
Yeah, I think the way that Stani set up was probably the only way that he could, because Russia's massive issue in defense is when they are defending the transition. It's when a counter-attacking team like Denmark or basically any team in the world with a little bit of pace who actually play at a high tempo counter and catch Russia on the transition. That's when they struggle. That's when you see the organizational errors pop up. That's when you see the easy mistakes. If you've got 10 Russian defenders, especially with the Kudryashov, for example, who hates getting turned, just sitting on the edge and being able to soak up pressure, that's them in their prime. They could probably have done that all day. As soon as Damsgaard scores, though, they have to get pulled out. So I think it was basically inevitable that the game was going to go away from them at that point. But David, do you think that Safonov maybe could have done better? Because I know I kind of not an impassioned defense, but I did kind of defend him a little bit on the Twitter account, and I thought that him leaving it makes it look worse than it is in actuality. And I think that the way that how high the ball is, because it dips from about 3 or 4 yards over the bar, makes it totally understandable as to why he does leave it. But by the time it's in the net, it's probably at like midriff height. It's really a savable height, so it's a difficult one for me.
It's weird because obviously he stood there. He's like at least 3 or 4 yards off his line, as I recall. I haven't seen the goal since the day after the game, I don't think. But he's definitely not on his line. And I wondered when I saw the replay from behind, did he leave it because he thought it was going wide or over, or did he just think he was just not getting near it? Because at the time it comes past him, the ball is too high. Like, I don't think he's even getting there. So it's either he should be further back on his line, which, I'm no goalkeeping expert. I don't know what the proper position would be then. Should you be on your line? Would you be expected to be on your line? I don't really think so. Goalkeepers don't usually stick religiously to that line. So, I saw people fighting both corners for him online as well, not just from RFN, BBC, just general social media, some people fighting for him, some people saying, he should be doing better. I'm sort of in the middle. Without knowing and asking him, saying, why did you leave it? It's hard to say. So I'll give him the benefit and just say, it's a fantastic effort and he could do very little about it. I think he was very hard done by the Christensen goal, because in like the 60 seconds preceding it, he'd made like three great saves. And, we know Russia in general produces a lot of good shot stoppers, and Safonov is, like most Eastern European goalkeepers, he is a great shot stopper, and he proved it there. He saved one great effort. The ball went out of play, comes back in from a cross. He then saves two in like 10 seconds. The ball gets cleared, and Christensen then hammers it. And it's just flying so fast that he can't even react to it. And I'm assuming he was slightly partially sighted towards the ball, because he when he did react, it was too late. But obviously, the ball was travelling so fast. So he was very hard done by for that one. And he didn't look the best when it came to the Poulsen one. But, that's out of his hands. Zoblin just not even looking when he plays that ball back. So I think Safonov was one of the few Russian players who came out of the tournament with some credit. He, in general, when he came in, played fairly well. A couple of times, a bit shaky, as we know he can be. A couple of times in the air, he came for a corner and didn't quite get there. I remember he had a bit of a scramble on the floor at one point with some Danish players, but I thought in general he was very good, and sort of that was good, because he'd struggled after coming back from injury last season. So it was good to see him, become Russia's number one potentially now long term, step up and do that. So yeah, very, very promising from him, I thought, in general.
Yeah. I thought after that goal, yes, Safonov was so unlucky for the Christiansen one as well. I think when Christiansen received the ball, he was literally on the floor facing the other way because he just made the save. So it was pretty, to be fair to him, good goalkeeping that he actually got anywhere near the shot, considering it was hit with absolute venom. Toke, what do you think? Do you think that in the second half, that Christiansen's goal, do you think that was just really what killed Russia off from that point and what changed the game totally, I think?
Yeah, exactly. That was like the final nail in the coffin, and I think it says a lot about Russia's lack of luck that Christensen, of all players, is the guy who scores that goal, because I've literally never seen him take a shot from outside the box. I read a tweet from one of his youth coaches at Brøndby, who said that he had trained him for so many years at Brøndby and he had never seen him take a shot. It's not, he doesn't even practice taking shots for fun, because he just never finishes. He has scored a few headers here and there, but this was his first goal on the national team, and he just doesn't have that aura of being one of those dangerous defenders. So I think it really was like the perfect storm where everything just went Denmark's way, and then Christensen scores a world beater like that. That is, of all the players, he's the last guy anybody would have predicted to do that.
Yeah, certainly. And it was one hell of a goal as well. But I want to just take a moment to discuss, because I think there was so much wrong with a lot of Russia's play during the tournament, be it poor game management, attacking and defensive structure, individual mistakes, lack of pressure, sometimes lack of effort and energy, to be honest, especially in the opening game. But the Zoblin error was the fourth, I believe, individual error that Russia had made at the tournament. But at that point, they were the only team out of the entire of the tournament who had made more than one individual error leading directly to a goal. And that error in itself is really, I like these little microcosms that I mention quite often with games, but it really does just tell a story of a lot of where Russia's issues are on the pitch. If we focus on the pitch here, because we don't have 8 weeks to discuss the issues off the pitch. But he scans the area in front of himself and has a look to see where his options are, but then doesn't take the other look, doesn't double check his awareness on the other side. And on the other side of him, you've got a defence which is absolutely and totally, completely out of position. Kudryashov is far too high up the pitch. They're just not a cohesive unit. And yes, Zoblin's on the ball. Yes, Russia are starting to progress in attack. But it's just really poor offensive structure for them to be so far out of shape. And it's a terrible pass. It's terrible awareness from Zoblin. But by the time Poulsen's even in the area, the Russian trio at the back are just absolutely nowhere to be seen. And further beyond that, in the entirety of the first half, Denmark always had what in hockey is called an odd man rush, where they would flood one channel. A lot of the time, it was, I think it's Vass, is it pronounced? He would hug the touchline and would overload whichever side they would focus upon. And Dormsgaard's goal actually came from an overload from the right hand side and then a quick diag to switch play. The pressing was exactly the same. They would overload one of the wings, and would press really high. And Russia's structure in reaction to that was just basically non-existent. And it really comes down to when you get to the elite level like this, a lot of international tournaments are decided upon psychological work off the pitch with the players, and these keen sort of tactical tweaks that, because you've got such little time to work together, it'll be focused on and really worked on. England did it really well in 2018 with the set pieces that was just drilled into them. They were pretty much set piece merchants, to be honest, but that's obviously something that Denmark had looked for. And there's just not enough from that at all, David, do you think, from Russia's perspective, just from the coaching perspective, and really just these phases of play where you can see real elite performance? I just haven't seen anywhere near enough of it.
Yeah, it's the sort of it's a weird one, because you go to it and you think, right, well, we know the Russian players aren't world beaters, so they're going to be able, susceptible to making mistakes or not making the right decision. But we also know that that's not the be all and end all, because we've seen teams who aren't as good coached well to winning tournaments, leagues, cups, etc. So it's definitely a combination of both, I think. Those mistakes, which teams like Russia are going to have mistakes, can be covered up mostly if the team is coached well enough, to cover that. There's been a long-standing debate about Russian coaching and the lack of good coaches in Russia and how much it costs to become a coach in Russia, and that being the reason why. So that's a whole different thread to go down. But ultimately, it seems like a mixture of both in that case. And it's hard to account for. That mistake that was very early in the second half. I want to say the Zobnin thing, and it just that was the killer nail. The penalty was that Russia got was very soft and out of nothing. But even after that, it didn't seem like they were going to work their way back from there to get an equaliser. And obviously Denmark very quickly turned it back to their advantage. So, yeah.
So you've alluded there to some bad coaching. Now, I think it's impossible to discuss what's happened in this tournament from a Russian perspective and not question Stani Cherchesov's future. It's been really one of the key points in the fallout from the match in the Russian press, particularly. Now, he is the fourth highest earning manager at the tournament, if I remember rightly. He's definitely in the top five. I can't remember if it's fourth or fifth. I think it's only Jurgi Löw, Didier Deschamps, and Gareth Southgate who actually paid more than Cherchesov. He's on 18 million rubles a year, which is actually more than the official salary that Vladimir Putin himself is on. It's well known that he is a close friend of Putin. He's often seen at his dacha and having dinners with him, and is very well liked by the RFU. And it's kind of, I believe, check me if I'm wrong, David, but it's the general feeling that a lot of members of the press in Russia are getting are that because of this, and because people are blaming other things, it seems likely that he is probably going to stay on, at least for now, or seems that way.
I haven't followed the fallout in the Russian press too greatly. I remember back in whenever we did a pod, maybe Jan or something, or late last year, where I suggested that he should go or could go after the Euros regardless of the performance, just because it's the signals that usher in the under 21 generation, right? The generation that the RFU focused so hard on keeping together. Players were held back from the senior national side so they could stick with the under 21 side, which ultimately that team didn't qualify from the Euros in March. And then we did see a couple of them go to the Euros. Diveev and Makarov went off to the Euros, and Zakharyan was called up obviously as well, but dropped because of illness. And whether it happened, I think my personal thing is, I think it would be needed. I think a fresh coach is needed to come in and take risks and call up the younger players, because the squad management is one of the biggest issues that I think Cherchesov had during this tournament. He went into it saying that Yuri Zhirkov would play every game, despite only playing like 100 minutes of football in 2021, which is at age 37, which is frankly ridiculous. When you've got other players available, he then didn't call up other left backs or left other left backs out of the squad. So then when Zhirkov was then injured in the first game, he was left with playing Kuzayev there, who frankly did a good job, I thought, in general. But there are other left backs, more natural left backs, who could have done that job. And Kuzayev could then be utilised elsewhere. Kuzayev in that midfield could have been great as a pressing option. He's such a workhorse. And then the lack of plan B, I mentioned it earlier, the lack of a plan B. Zuba's there. Russia need a goal. They bring on just another 6'5" striker. The only player on that pitch at any time who was going to chase a ball, who can sprint and potentially win it for a race, is Golovin. There's no other really outrageously quick players on the pitch. No other players who are going to, take on a player. He had Makarov in the squad, had him on the bench only for the middle game, the Finland game. Wasn't even an option to be available in the final game because he wasn't included on the bench. Cheryshev didn't come on. I don't know what was up with his fitness, or whether he was not ready. But the squad management was just not good enough, and just excluding all that as well. Just not having Smolov there as the backup striker option, someone who can be different. Zuba's there to win balls, not to score headers, but to win balls in the air and flick-ons and knockdowns. And Smolov is a guy who could, in theory, under a good coach, should feed off that. Imagine Smolov and Zuba at Zenit together. It'd be outrageous in that setup. And Azmoun is currently the guy who fills that quote-unquote Smolov spot. So I think fresh blood's needed. There needs to be a coach, whether it will be Galaktionov, who I doubt his actual coaching abilities and his ability to get results, but he's familiar with the personnel at the very least. But I think there needs to be a new face there who's not going to just keep on calling up Shunins, Kudyashovs, Zhirkovs, and call up guys who are more deserving, and who are going to be part of the team long term, because that's the next tournament, isn't it, for another 3 years, I suppose, for the World Cup. Got to qualify for it first, and that you want that squad who's going to qualify to grow and develop and be the squad who then goes on to the tournament. So I think a new face is needed.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. If I look at it from a little bit of a longer term perspective, my major worry is that we have now a chance to really rebuild the team around an under-21 squad, which, as you said, have stayed together for so long, are very talented, have actually been anachronistically and ridiculously called the young golden generation a few times I've seen on Championat. Now we can take that highly skilled squad and try and rebuild. But is Stani really the man that anybody wants doing that? I mean, if you just look at the tournament itself, Daniil Fomin was the standout Russian central midfielder in the Premier League last season. Roman Yevgeniev, the standout Russian defender in the league last season, neither got a single minute. Denis Makarov didn't get a single minute. Makarov was ideal for the Denmark game. Denmark have to push. They're going to have to come at Russia. All Russia had to do was sit deep, soak it up and counter-attack. The one biggest chance early on was through Golovin, was he nearly scored. Imagine if you had Makarov on the other side doing that. The plan just doesn't suit one of the best players whatsoever in Liesha. He's completely bypassed every single time Russia are on the ball. You really don't want a player like that. A manager like him, who's totally tactically devoid, can't coach, can't manage, taking control of what could potentially be a solid chance for Russia to rebuild. 2018 just merely stuck a massive plaster over a huge issue. It was amazing. It was a great result. It was a great performance from the players to react to that sort of wave of emotion and wave of patriotism in the country, because that's really what got them there. It was everything just kind of collided at once for them to respond so well, and it was all emotional. It was all psychological. But in actuality, it's covered up so many issues that have been prevalent in the game, both domestically and on the international level, for far too long now. They're not going to be fixed. It's impossible to fix them. They should have started to fix them a long time ago. There's no national training base. There's no national elite player development program. There's no national elite coaching program. All I hear is, well, who replaces Stani? Don't know. One part of me wants to say anybody, but the other part of me says because they haven't put these work in years ago when they got given the World Cup, when they should have then put plans in place for long-term development of football from a coaching perspective, never mind from a financial perspective, from a structural perspective, but purely coaching. They should have put the plans in place there. And there could be stronger young coaches coming through, because you always hear Galaktianov mentioned, because there's really very few other genuinely young, tactically sound Russian coaches right now. But in lieu of forcing everybody to hear one of my tangents, I will pass it on to Toke, because I would like to hear the opinion of somebody who is both experienced in the knowledge of Russian football, but crucially totally neutral now that you've managed to peel yourself away.
I will try to be as neutral as I can, but yeah, I think it was spot on what you said about the 2018 World Cup. I remember we did a podcast back then and talked about actually one of the worst things that could possibly happen for Russian football long term was what actually happened, and that Russia did so decent because that sort of covered up, as you said, covered up all of these issues and sort of gave back this belief that, hey, we are actually quite decent when there are so many things that needs to be fixed and so many things that needs to be changed for the country to actually fulfill the potential that obviously it has with the history and the talent pool and the population and all of this. I haven't, as I said earlier, I haven't followed all of this as closely as you guys recently, but I think, and this is also something we talked about back after Slutsky was fired, when Cherchesov was hired, that he is not a coach who has ever built anything. When you're looking at his coaching history, he did very, very well at Terek. He did very well at Amkar. He built some defensively very, very strong teams, but he's not a coach who has ever really developed a team, taken them from something and actually left a great squad behind, a solid squad, a team that is tactically strong. I mean, he has always played on, I don't want to say the easy things, but I mean, he has been a coach who could set up 5 defenders to really shut down the opponent and then deliver good results in the league. And then he came to Dynamo Moscow and took over one of the most expensive squads in the whole league. And I mean, even there, he wasn't that good. They got to play some European football, but ultimately it was a disappointment. And then, yeah, he took over the strongest team in Poland and won the double. I'm not saying that that's an easy task or anything like that, but I imagine Legia Warsaw is a little bit like coaching Zenit, and you have to, it's almost harder not to win the league than to actually win it. So I mean, for me, it's a no-brainer getting somebody in who actually has some visions, because Cherchesov, and I don't think you can blame him, because he has done what he was hired to do to bring some stability and to not be embarrassed in the home field in 2018, and he qualified for this tournament. But he's never a guy who's gonna develop Russia and take them to where the country needs to be and wants to be. And I think they need to bring in somebody more visionary. I'm not saying they should go out and bring in Guardiola, but but of course they need somebody with some visions and some ambitions on the sake of the team, and not somebody who keeps bringing in Shirkov and all of these old guys just because it might give him a better chance of drawing or winning 1-0 against Finland. I mean, that really shouldn't be the ambition level, because then nothing is ever going to change.
Yeah. David, what do you think about ambition? And as one last thing as well, I kind of mentioned myself a little bit earlier, my thoughts on it, but what's next for Russia? And is this perhaps a little bit of a blessing in disguise that Zakarian succumbed to that illness before the tournament?
I mean, I just had a couple of thoughts. Did the delay of the Euros affect Russia? Because this time, March last year, Russia was still on good form internationally. It was only sort of September that their form really turned poor. And I just thought, just a rhetorical, did that have a big impact? And then, in the future, we talk about Slitsky there. I'm sort of thinking now that he would be the perfect coach for the national team. When he did it before, obviously Euro 2016 was a disaster, but he was managing Cisco at the same time, and I've read interviews where he said that he was really struggling with that. But if you gave it him outright, and you look at his pedigree that he's developed over the last few years, in terms of developing younger players and actually playing, good football, getting teams working well, like he's done with Rubin. He had done fairly well with a brand new squad at home. Was let go, unfairly quite early on. Just wondered, and it just sort of occurred to me that Slitsky now could probably be the best shout. Whether it would happen, I don't know, but I think he would be not a bad option to put in if you could go for any Russian coach at the very least.
I would almost not want that to happen because I'm too intrigued.
I don't want it to happen
domestically.
Like, I want him to stay with Rubin, obviously, but I think it could and might work well if it did happen.
And on Zaharin, blessing in disguise, do you think he's going to be the central part of any potential rebuild now going forward, surely?
Well, yeah, presumably.
Or is it too soon to say?
The fact that he was called up at all by Cherchesov was a big honour, really, because considering how few young players Cherchesov would normally call up. So I suppose it's all going to depend on who's in charge. It looks like he's going to be a central figure for Dinamo this season. He's going to get, assuming he's uninjured, a full season of football under his belt, age 17. So it's a promising year, and we don't want to just rely on this and we just happen to have had a 17-year-old gem come through our system and we're going to just build around him. Russia needs to take that and get more gems through other systems, and if he does look very good. So I don't want to say build it around him, but I think he should seemingly be involved at the very least.
Yeah, certainly. And to end, because we are running out of time ahead of the 8:00 games, Toke, expectations for Denmark going forwards now? I think they're going to be pretty much the rest of Europe's second favourite team at the minute after what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I have actually been quite pessimistic, so I'm not celebrating anything yet. I think, yeah, obviously this whole Eriksen thing was sort of a curveball, and that skewed everything. But I think the fact that Denmark has now advanced to the next round, I mean, that was like the bare minimum. So I'm not gonna be ecstatic about this yet. I think we have higher potential for that. So obviously, I expect them to beat Wales. Anything but a victory there would also be a disappointment. And then I mean, if it looks like they will meet Holland in the quarterfinal, and if they win that match, then obviously I think then there's a lot of reason to celebrate. But if they reach a quarterfinal and are eliminated there, then I think it's been good tournament, but it hasn't been anything special. I know that sounds a little bit spoiled, but I think it's also we also have to be ambitious and a little bit critical, especially at a time like this where everybody are so enthusiastic and passionate, and then you also have to remember to be a little bit critical. But yeah, I mean, I think they will go to the quarterfinal. Then probably Holland would be too big of a mouthful.
Yeah. Look, if you're going to go into any major international tournament expecting and happy with early knockout stages defeat, then I think you're never going to win anything. I think there's nothing wrong with a little bit of hope and expectation. David, you have to believe that you've got something to promote right at the end of the site with a new Scout with Football handbook.
Yeah, the new handbook is out now, and I've finally got the chance to write that. The man, the myth, the legend that is Creature. So that was great, and I was very much limited, obviously, to 2 pages, and I probably could have gone on for 2 more, but yeah, that's out now. So feel free to go check that.
And Toke, you're good luck for the rest of the tournament. I was going to say we'll see you next week, but we'll be seeing myself and David next week. But Toke, good luck for the rest of the tournament from a Danish perspective, and it's been great to have you back on. I'm sure everyone will be glad to hear your voice again.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. I really appreciate it. It's always fun joining you guys.
I'm a little bit disappointed that we didn't have any bizarre Danish proverbs or some form of adjective. I think Andrew listening will be very unhappy about that, and he particularly loves them.
I did chuckle when Toke said that the Netherlands would be a mouthful for Denmark.
I wish I had a witty line to respond to that, but I think it's probably for the best for any potential younger generations listening that maybe do not. But we're going to actually be taking a short break here at RFN. We will be back ahead of the new season, which is actually 3.5 weeks away, David?
Yeah, 2.5 for the FNAL.
It's under a month
for the RPL.
Yeah, so we'll be taking a short break there. If David wants to cover the Finna L, I'm just going to give him a microphone and a time slot for an hour, and he can just do what he wants.
Sweet.
But no, we'll definitely be back for the Conference League match, Conference League qualification match, in which Sochi are playing one of the Azeri Baku teams. I really can't remember the name, so I can't say it either. But this has been the end of this week's RFN podcast. Goodbye for now.
Идет футбольный матч, летит над полем мяч. Веди его, беги, точнее его ударь. Но мяч берет ноги решительный вратарь. Не напрасно футбольное поле самых ловких и смелых влечет. Здесь нужны тренировка и воля, быстрота, увлечение, расчет.